Hey guys, what's up? I'm here with an Arms Warrior DPS guide for the Legion pre-patch, patch 7.0.3. And in this guide, I'm going to be going over talents, spells and abilities you should be using, your stat priority, and then your rotation for single target and AoE, as well as demonstrations of each. Now, for the AoE rotation, I will split it up into a couple different sections there, and I'll break it down for you guys when I get there. And then we'll finish up with some macros and add-ons that you can use to help you out. Let's go ahead and jump right in to the talents. For the first tier, I recommend Dauntless for most situations, single target for sure, and any big AoE, meaning anything over 2 targets. It just reduces your rage cost of any abilities that cost rage, which is a lot of them, which just smooths out your rotation because you do get rage starved now and again as arms. If you want, you can use Overpower for single target. Kind of makes it more active, but it's just not quite as good as Dauntless. Now, if you have 2 targets only, so specifically 2 targets, you can use Sweeping Strikes, and it's quite good. And all it does is it makes your Mortal Strike and Execute hit a second target that's nearby. So for single target and anything over 2 targets, Dauntless, and for just 2 targets, Sweeping Strikes. Now for level 30 talents, it's kind of up to you what you want or what you need in the fight. Shockwave is the same as it's been. It's an AoE cone stun, so it can be useful for like AoE stuns, say on Zul'Harak with imps. Stormbolt, pretty much the same as it was as well. It's a range stun, so if you need a stun on like a single ad. But one note is that it doesn't do the extra damage it used to do on boss targets or unstunnable targets, so it's not a DPS increase to use that at all. And then you have Double Time, which gives you 2 charges of charge and reduces its cooldown. So generally, I'll stick with this as a default unless I need the other stuns for like ad control or something. Just because it can, it improves your mobility if you have to move away from the boss or switch between ads. So generally I'll go Double Time, but just kind of fit it to your situation. For your level 45 talents, I like Fervor of Battle. It increases the damage your whirlwind does to its primary target, and it's the constant increase to your DPS in this tier. Rend, not the greatest right now. Costs a little rage. You're already kind of starved on the rage here and there, and it just does the dot damage. It doesn't explode at the end, and it's not terrible, but it does take extra globals and add another rage dump into your rotation. Avatar, you can use if the fight's really short, or if you really need that burst. It's not bad. It's just over like a consistent fight length right now. If you have those, Fervor of Battle will end up doing more. But Avatar does have its place. If you have a really short fight, if you're just blowing up the bosses, go ahead and use that. Or if you need that burst for progression on something where you need to kill an ad really quickly, then it's worth taking. Now in level 60, it's another survivability / movement type tier. So Second Wind restores health when you're not taking damage, when you've been, safe for 5 seconds or so. Now there's a lot of raid damage that does generally happen that you can't really avoid, so this doesn't always come into play. Not really recommended, but if you can make it work for you, and you need the heals, go for it. Defensive stance, not great for raiding. It reduces the damage you take, but it also reduces the damage you do, and it takes a global to switch into it and out of it, so you really lose a lot if you're trying to use defensive stance in raid, as far as DPS is concerned. And then we've got Bounding Stride. Just like with Fury, it reduces the cooldown in your Heroic Leap and gives it a little speed boost afterward. So generally default to Bounding Stride. I mean, Second Wind, it's not going to be bad to you. It just won't be active that often. So it's kind of up to you. I would definitely recommend one of these two. Generally Bounding Stride though. Level 75, I'd go for In for the Kill. And what it does is under 20%, so when you can execute, a Mortal Strike instead generates 20 rage rather than spending it. So it helps you get more executes off since you're generating extra rage. It really helps with your execute DPS and boosts your DPS even more when you get to that part. Now Mortal Combo, it's not bad. You get 2 charges of Mortal Strike instead of 1, but you actually end up resetting your Mortal Strike pretty quickly, and pretty often rather, with Tactician, and it's a pretty short cooldown, so you don't get like full value out of this right now. So it's not bad. You can play around with it if you like. It just in for the kill does a little bit more, especially when you get to those execute phases to finish off the fight. And then focus rage, just not really worth taking right now. Takes an extra rage, another button, and you have to use it multiple times to get full value out of it before you Mortal Strike, which is kind of difficult. It's just not quite as good as either of the other two options. So definitely recommend in for the kill, but you can also play with Mortal Combo if you want to have more mortal strikes in your general rotation. Level 90, I recommend Trauma. It's completely passive, does extra damage, does really good damage for both AoE and single target, and you don't have to worry about anything. Now, Deadly Calm isn't terrible. It allows you to use Battle Cry and then spam whatever abilities. It's especially useful in the execute phase, because then you can spam Battle Cry, or cast Battle Cry, excuse me, and then spam execute, because it's free, until the 5 seconds are up. So it's not bad, but really only useful, like extra useful in execute phase. It doesn't do quite as much, and Trauma does quite a bit like outside of that as well as in execute phase, so it kind of whichever style you prefer, but I think Trauma will end up doing you better in general. And then Titanic Might, you can use between like 2 to 3 targets. It's usable, so you can get more Colossus Smashes up, but even then it's a little bit subpar, so I generally recommend one of the other two. And your level 100 tier talents, I recommend Opportunity Strikes. It's really good for AoE and single target. It's completely passive as well, so you don't have to worry about it, just does extra damage on your stuff, on your melee abilities. If you use Anchor Management, all it reduces now is the cooldown of Battle Cry by 1 second every 10 rage you spend, and it can be pretty nice with Deadly Calm. So in the execute phase you get more Battle Cries, and Deadly Calm comes up more often, so it's not a bad pairing, these two, if you want to try that out. As far as Ravager goes, it's not bad for big AoE situations where you really want the 1 minute cooldown versus the 1.5 minute cooldown that Bladestorm offers. And you do, since you do throw Ravager down on the ground and it kind of stays there, you can still do other abilities while your Ravager is going, whereas Bladestorm you have to channel. But you also have to be careful about positioning, because if they move the boss or adds out of this area, then you lose all that damage. So you can use this in big AoE fights if you have predictable AoE on the timer that happens to stay still. And it also pairs nicely with Battle Cry, because they're both 1 minute cooldowns. And so you can always Battle Cry into Ravager for AoE if you decide to go this route. Whereas Bladestorm has 1.5 minutes, so it's kind of it falls off a bit with the Battle Cry timer. So that's it for talents. Now let's move on to spells and abilities you'll be using as an Arms Warrior, and there aren't actually that many, which is kind of nice if you're starting out with Warrior. So we'll start with Mortal Strike, and it costs Rage, got a cooldown's reduced by haste, and it does damage. It also reduces healing they take, but that's not really relevant for raiding. So just kind of your generic Rage dump until you get to execute phase. And then we've got Colossus Smash, a really important skill. It's free, it's 45-second cooldown, and it does a bunch of damage. It also increases the damage the enemies take by a certain percentage based on your mastery. That's really, really good, and it will be coming up fairly often with both your passive, which I'll actually take a look at right now, Tactician, and if you have Class Trinket right now, which helps reset it as well. So we have as passive Tactician, you have a chance per rage you spend and to reset the cooldown on Colossus Smash and Mortal Strike. And this comes up fairly often. It looks really small, but it's 0.65% chance per rage spent to reset the cooldown. So it comes up fairly often, and that's why these two skills do reset a lot. Then we've got Whirlwind, which you use, of course, for AoE, but if you've taken Fervor of Battle, you'll also use it for single target, because it does more than the other option, which would be Slam. And so Slam is if you haven't taken Fervor of Battle, this is what you would use in single target to kind of dump Rage while your Colossus Smash is off cooldown, or is on cooldown rather, and Mortal Strike is also unavailable, or you've just used it. Then we've got Execute. It doesn't cost that much rage, but it does take more rage if you have it available to do more damage. And you can only use it below 20%, does a bunch of damage, and that's pretty much how that one goes. Then we have Cleave. It's cheap. It does kind of a sweeping strike in front of you, and for every target it hits, it increases the damage of your next Whirlwind by quite a bit. So this is important in your AoE rotation, which we'll get to when we get to that section. Then we've got Victory Rush. You can't really use it that much in raids. It's when something dies, you have the ability, if you kill something, it heals you and does a little bit of damage. So if you happen to get this proc and you need a heal, it's perfect. Just go ahead and use it, but it doesn't come up very often in raids. Then we have our Interrupt through Pummel. It's just a melee interrupt, kick spellcast, etc. We've got Charge from movement, so you can charge to different targets. Hamstring to slow if you need some melee range, so it's kind of difficult to use a lot of the time, but it is there if you need it. Now, we don't really use Heroic Throw, but we do have it. And then we've got Berserker Rage to break certain types of CC. Right now, not very relevant in Hellfire, but it is there. We do have the old Rallying Cry, basically renamed into Commanding Shout. So 3-minute cooldown, buffs your health, etc. We've got Taunt, of course, if we need to hold the boss for a little bit, or an add, for example, like an Infernal on Archimond. We've got Heroic Leap for movement. It just leaps you to an area, and then with Bounding Stride, you get a speed boost. If not, that's it. It leaps. It's another movement speed, or movement ability, rather. And then we have our defensive, Die by the Sword. It's a 3-minute cooldown now. Like before, increases your parry chance by 100, so if you're tanking, say, a boss, while they pick up the other tank, or just to finish it off, this will make you not get hit by any of his melee attacks. You'll be parrying everything. And it also reduces the damage you take by 30%, so it's also a nice defensive cooldown in case raid damage is coming to hit you. We do have Bladestorm by default as an Alms Warrior, so just an AoE, big AoE burst. And the channel time is actually reduced by haste, which is quite interesting. We'll get into that later a little bit more. And then we've got our AoE Fear and Battle Cry. Battle Cry is your 1-minute cooldown. It gets you 100% crit strike for 5 seconds. Pretty self-explanatory. You'll be critting all the time when this is up. So it's a nice cooldown. So now that we've gone through that, let's go ahead and look at your stat priority. So first you've got Haste, and Haste is your best stat right now. And what Haste will do for you is it reduces the cooldown of Mortal Strike and also Cleave in AoE situations, as well as your swing speed, which of course increases the amount of passive rage you generate through your auto attacks. Also, it does reduce the channel time of Bladestorm, making it do more faster, so you can then continue on with your rotation afterward. And so it's all around a good stat for you. Now after Haste is Mastery, which increases the base damage of your Colossus Smash, and also the bonus damage that it provides when you buff, debuff, and get that extra damage going. So also a really good stat. And after that is Versatility, and then which is just a straight damage buff, and then Critical Strike, which has no real interaction with Arms Warrior. So to recap, Haste, then Mastery, and then Critical Strike. Alright, now let's get into your single target rotation for arms. Now, what you're going to want to do is basically use Colossus Smash on cooldown, and even when it procs, use it right away, even if your debuff that you've applied isn't actually up yet, or it's not gone yet. Just use it on cooldown. Every time it comes up, procs or otherwise, just use it right away. And then Mortal Strike as soon as possible after that, and then fill with Whirlwind, or again, if you're not using Fervor of Battle, you can use Slam in its place, but I generally recommend that you do use it. But if you're using Avatar, for example, then you would use Slam instead of Whirlwind as your filler for single target. And that is actually your single target rotation for before you get to the execute range. And of course, try to line up your cooldowns. If you can, have Battle Cry line up with Colossus Smash, and definitely with the Legendary Ring, for example, but it doesn't always happen that way, but do your best to try to line that up without losing too much time on Battle Cry. And then once you get to execute range, you're pretty much going to follow the same rotation. You still want to Colossus Smash a lot. And then instead of Mortal Strike, you're going to be using your rage on execute. It's got your highest damage per rage consumption, and just does a lot. And you definitely want to have it up all the time, as much as possible when Colossus Smash happens. And then once you spend your rage, you can use Mortal Strike, which with the in for the kill, actually gives you rage, allowing you to execute more. And that's pretty much the execute rotation. So you kind of replace your rage spenders with execute. And then, still Colossus Smash on cooldown does crap ton of damage, and it boosts your damage. Is really important to keep doing that. And then to generate rage at that point, sub 20%, Mortal Strike. Now, I'll go ahead and show you guys on the dummies. I won't be able to show you the execute rotation, but I can show you just the demonstration of like your single target. So we'll charge in, pop Battle Cry, Colossus Smash, Mortal Strike, and then Whirlwind. Because I have Fervor of Battle, I'm using Whirlwind right now, rather than Slam. Then Mortal Strike is up, Whirlwind, Colossus Smash proc, so I'll use that, and then Mortal Strike to reset as well. Colossus Smash is up again, and then just Whirlwind to fill. Again, you could be using Slam here if you were using not Fervor for Battle, so if you're using Avatar, for example. And Colossus Smash comes up, and now I wait for some Rage. And one thing you can do to kind of help out your deeps is make sure that you have Mortal Strike ready for Colossus Smash, if possible. Sometimes you just get proc after proc after proc of Colossus Smash, so there's not much you can do, especially with the class trinket. So you can actually get it where only Colossus Smash resets and Mortal Strike doesn't. But if you Tactician procs, they will both reset. So just make sure you, if Mortal Strike is coming, is ready, but Colossus Smash is like a second or two away from getting off cooldown, then you might want to save Mortal Strike so that you can Mortal Strike right away after Colossus Smash. And that's literally it. So, cooldown's up again, Battle Cry, Colossus Smash, Whirlwind, Mortal Strike, and that's just it. That is your single target rotation. Now, if you were in Execute, of course, you'd be using Execute rather than your Rage Spenders, but then Mortal Strike turns into a Rage Generator for you. So, pretty similar. Once you get in there, just kind of weave in Executes, especially after Colossus Smashes. Now, as far as a 2-target rotation goes, you're just going to replace your talent with your Dauntless for Sweeping Strikes, and you're basically going to do the exact same thing. The only difference is, once you, when you're going to go to Whirlwind, you're going to instead squeeze in a Cleave right before, because it's going to buff your Whirlwind by 40% for a lot less rage than would be spent that way. So same thing, keep Colossus Smash up, do Mortal Strike, because Mortal Strike is now hitting 2 targets with Sweeping Strikes, so it does a lot of damage. And then before you Whirlwind, you Cleave first, then Whirlwind, and then go back and keep doing Whirlwind, because Cleave does have a cooldown, and you just follow that priority system. So keep Colossus Smash up. If you get procs of Colossus Smash, one thing you can do is you can hit the other target with it as well, so they're both debuffed and they're both taking extra damage. Can be nice. Try that out, and it'll help you out. Now, obviously, you don't always get that many procs, so if you don't, you can just focus on a single target. But if you're getting them pretty consistently or pretty quickly, you could try to do that. Spread out your Colossus Smashes on the 2 targets and get you extra damage. Now, same thing when Execute comes in at 2 targets. Spend your Rage on it. It does a lot of damage. It's worth using because you're hitting both targets. So Colossus Smash, Execute to dump the Rage. Especially if they're both below 20%, but even if one is, I believe it cleaves off. So really good. And then Mortal Strike to gain Rage and then continue executing. And of course, cooldowns are when possible. So it's more of a, rather than an AoE rotation with 2 targets, more of a Cleave rotation, and you have to have Sweeping Strikes to do that. If you don't have Sweeping Strikes and you're down from an AoE type thing to just 2 targets, but you don't have this, pretty much just follow the AoE rotation that I'll be getting into in just a little bit here. So that's your 2-target rotation. Now, as far as AoE goes, I will show you guys with Ravager. So I'll use this right now, but you don't have to. You can just keep Bladestorm. And what you're going to want to do is, depending on how many targets there are, so there's going to be at least 3 or more targets when you use this kind of rotation. The key here is you kind of want to Cleave before you Whirlwind, and then Whirlwind, and Whirlwind, and Whirlwind. And that's pretty much your AoE rotation. You will weave in Colossus Smashes when you can. The more targets there are, the less important Colossus Smash becomes, because it's only a single target damage spell. Now you can do the thing you did with the 2-target rotation. You can try to spread out frequent resets on it on different targets to kind of boost your AoE. It can get a little complicated, trying to tab target or click on the different frames, like nameplates and enemies and such, but it will technically help you out if you're using that. But Cleave is really important. You want to use it on cooldown pretty much in AoE, and then Whirlwind to make sure you're using that buff you get from it before it comes back up. Once you pass 2 targets, so 3 or more, and you're not using Sweeping Strikes anyway, you pretty much exclude Mortal Strike and Execute from your rotation, even at sub 20%, especially as you get more and more, like 3, 4, 5, 6 enemies. Execute just doesn't hold up to the damage that per rage that Whirlwind will give you. Now, as far as Ravager use or Bladestorm, you try to line it up with your cooldown, which in this case is just Battle Cry. If you have Ravager, it's the same cooldown, so it's pretty easy to do. But if you have Bladestorm, it's actually a little bit off because Bladestorm is a 1.5-minute cooldown, whereas Battle Cry is 1 minute. In that case, it's kind of up to you. If your Bladestorm isn't up all the time for important periods of AoE burst, then you can use Battle Cry outside of it to not lose out on that damage. However, if your Bladestorm is always lining up nicely with periods in the fight where you need it, then you can save Battle Cry for those important periods. So it can get a little tricky trying to balance those two. But again, pretty much you want to cleave and Whirlwind and Whirlwind and Whirlwind until cleave is up again, and so on. And that's pretty much it. And pop cooldowns when you have them. And do Colossal Smash when it's up on something, preferably like a priority target. So I'll go ahead and show you guys on this dummy. And I'll go ahead and charge in Battle Cry, Ravager, and then Colossal Smash, and then cleave, Whirlwind, and Colossal Smash. Now I have it up again, so I'll actually use it on another target, just to kind of buff my the damage I'm doing, and then cleave again, and Whirlwind, and Whirlwind, and Whirlwind, and it's up again, so I'll use it on another target maybe. And Whirlwind, so I have cleave up, so I'll use that. Cleave to Whirlwind, and this is actually just your rotation. Cleave, Whirlwinds, and get your free Colossal Smashes in here and there when you can. And again, you don't have to switch your priority target if you're not getting like frequent procs, and even if you are, it's not a huge DPS increase, but it's nice if you can, especially if there's only 3 targets. It's something to consider, something to do while you're just spamming your 2 buttons. And so even though I have Execute, it's actually not worth using, especially since I don't have Sweeping Strikes, but even if I did, Whirlwind is going to give me a little bit more oomph for my rage consumption at this point. The more enemies that there are, the more that Whirlwind does over Execute, even in that point, in the rotation. So that is your AoE rotation as arms. Pretty simple, nothing too complex. And then just lining up your cooldowns to try to get the most out of Bladestorm and or Ravager, depending on which talent you take. So that's pretty much it for your rotations and how to use them. Now, as far as macros and add-ons go, I don't really use anything right now because it's such a simple rotation. If I were to use something, I would use Weak Auras or Power Auras or TellMeWhen or something to maybe track the Colossus debuff timer. See, especially in like multiple situations, in multiple target situations, so that you can kind of tell, oh well, is my Colossus Smash debuff like running out? Should I hit the other target with it so I can debuff it for a decent amount of time and get some value out of that? A single target you don't really need to because you spam it as much as possible always, so you don't really have to worry about that. But multiple target you could if you're trying to go for that extra Colossus Smash debuffing. But that's about it. So that's it for this video. Now I'll go ahead and link a macro you could use as well. If you wanted to, which is to link Battle Cry and Ravager if you're using that talent for AoE. With Bladestorm, you don't really want to do it though, so just kind of be cautious with that. But other than that, if you guys like the video, go ahead and hit it with a like. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, feel free to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, let me know if you have any questions and such, and I hope you guys enjoy. Cheers.